Welcome to Abyss of Horror, where reality shudders and shadows dance in strange patterns, begging the question, do you believe time is truly linear? Tonight I'll tell you of 3 stories that defy logic. Tales where the very fabric of reality crumbled, leaving mere mortals helplessly adrift in time itself. Gather close, for these are not mere legends. They are accounts from people who dared to wander too close to the edge of reality and felt it slip beneath them. Let us begin. The Moberly-Jourdain Incident, Versailles, 1901. On an afternoon in 1901, 2 English schoolteachers, Charlotte Ann Moberly and Eleanor Jourdain, decided to explore the famed gardens of the Palace of Versailles. They were respectable women, scholars who sought only a day of tranquility in the grand estates of history. But as they wandered deeper into the Versailles gardens, something strange began to happen. The air grew thick, as if weighed down by unseen shadows pressing against their skin. The trees seemed to warp, their branches twisting into ominous shapes that clawed toward the sky, casting strange, darkened shadows upon the ground. As they walked, an overwhelming silence fell over them. They could no longer hear the distant laughter of tourists or the faint whispers of the French wind. It was as if they had entered another realm entirely, a world devoid of sound and familiar life. The path they walked on was unfamiliar, and yet it lay within the grounds they had mapped out earlier. With each step, they felt more disoriented, more lost, as though they were sinking deeper into some unseen mire. Then, they began to see people. But these weren't the tourists or locals they had expected. No. These figures were dressed in clothing that appeared to belong to the 18th century. Women in long, layered skirts walked solemnly, their faces pale and expressionless. Men in high-collared coats and wigs passed by with barely a glance, their movements stiff and unyielding as if bound by invisible chains. One of the men, they noted, had a face devoid of emotion. A pale mask, lifeless and void. They tried to look away to avert their gaze and shake off the strange sense of wrongness that now weighed upon them. But it was as if an unseen force compelled them to witness this surreal scene. Then, by a small, murky stream, they saw her. A woman, her expression filled with an indescribable sadness, sat quietly, sketching. Her attire was regal yet faded, like a specter of old nobility, and something about her presence sent a chill racing through Moberly and Jourdain's veins. They would later claim, with no doubt in their minds, that the woman was none other than Marie Antoinette herself, haunted, drawn forever to this place, reliving her last days before the Revolution. In a frenzy, the 2 women hurried away, desperate to escape the haunting vision. When they turned a corner, everything returned to normal. The sounds of modern life resumed. The eerie silence lifted. And yet, they felt as though they had barely escaped the grip of something dark and dreadful. Their souls bore a strange heaviness, as though touched by an echo of despair. When they returned to England and recounted their experience, they were mocked, ridiculed, and dismissed as delusional. But Moberly and Jourdain stood firm, maintaining that they had indeed walked through a moment in time long past. To this day, the gardens of Versailles are said to carry an otherworldly energy, an echo of pain, as though the land itself remembers the tragedies that unfolded there. And some say that those who wander too far into the past risk losing themselves forever. The Liverpool Bold Street Times slip, England, 1996. In Liverpool, England, Bold Street stands as an ordinary stretch of road, bustling, vibrant, and full of life. But it holds a strange reputation, a reputation that has grown darker over the years. Some say that the street has a mind of its own, a strange tendency to play with the minds and senses of those who walk along it. In 1996, a police officer named Frank was walking down Bold Street with his wife. It was an ordinary afternoon, full of the mundane routine of errands and casual conversation. Frank had a particular bookstore in mind and was heading toward it when something unexpected happened. As he walked, he felt a sudden chill, a tingling sensation that crept from his neck to his spine. The air grew thick and heavy, pressing down on him, making it difficult to breathe. His vision seemed to blur, and when he blinked, the world around him had changed. Gone were the familiar sights and sounds of modern Liverpool. Instead, he found himself in a different era altogether. The cars around him were old-fashioned, their colors faded as though dulled by the passage of time. People walked past him in clothes that seemed torn from the fabric of the 1950s. Dresses, hats, and coats that looked worn and weathered. The noise was different too. The hum of engines was softer, almost muted, like whispers of machinery from another time. Confused, Frank looked around, wondering if he was trapped in some strange dream or illusion. But the longer he stood there, the more real it became. He saw a store sign he didn't recognize. Cripps, where his beloved bookstore should have been. Without thinking, he took a step closer, transfixed, as if he'd been caught in a trance. And then, as quickly as it began, the sensation passed. The heavy air lifted, the blurred vision cleared, and Frank found himself back in the bustling, familiar world of Bold Street in 1996. The bookstore was back in its rightful place, and Cripps was nowhere to be found. His wife, who had walked on without him, hadn't noticed a thing. Later, when he spoke of his experience, he discovered that Cripps had indeed been a clothing store on that very street, but decades ago, back in the 1950s. Frank wasn't the only one to experience a Bold Street Times slip. Over the years, others reported similar phenomena. Visions of bygone eras, glimpses of people long dead, and places that no longer existed. Some say the street itself harbors a rift, a place where time blurs and the past clings tightly, waiting for another soul to fall victim to its haunting memories. If you find yourself enthralled by stories of lost time and eerie encounters, remember to like and subscribe. Here, in the abyss of horror, we walk the thin line between reality and nightmare. You wouldn't want to miss what else lurks within these twisted tales. The Vanishing Hotel, France, 1979. The year was 1979, and two English couples, Jeff and Pauline Simpson and Len and Cynthia Gisby, were on vacation, seeking adventure in the warmth of the French countryside. Driving through the rural landscapes, they soon grew tired and decided to stop for the night. Their journey brought them to a strange, isolated hotel, a place that seemed to emerge from nowhere, hidden amidst the shadows and vines. The hotel was peculiar, to say the least. The architecture was dated. The walls and furnishings bore an aged, almost neglected appearance. And yet it had a strange charm that drew them in. Exhausted from their travels, they entered, noting the unusual attire of the staff. uniforms that seemed to belong to a distant era. The people moved slowly, their faces expressionless, their voices monotone and strange. They were offered a room for an unbelievably low price. And despite the peculiar atmosphere, they accepted. That night, the couples couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. They could hear strange murmurs in the halls, as though the walls themselves were whispering. Shadows flickered in their rooms, and an uneasy silence pressed upon them, heavy and unrelenting. They barely slept, their dreams plagued by bizarre, incomprehensible images of faces they didn't recognize, of places that felt like echoes from another world. At dawn, they left the hotel, eager to escape the stifling atmosphere. When they tried to pay, the bill was suspiciously low, and yet no one commented on it. They left, hoping to put the strange experience behind them, but something about the place haunted their memories. When they returned to the area days later, curious to see the hotel in the light of day, it was gone. Not just empty, no trace of it remained. The spot where it had stood was now an empty field, desolate and bare, as if the hotel had never existed at all. Locals in the village claimed they'd never seen nor heard of such a place. Desperate for answers, the couple searched old records, but no trace of the hotel was ever found. Years later, other travelers reported similarly vanishing places throughout the countryside. Hotels, inns, even strange houses where people had once stayed, only to discover they were gone the next day. Was it a wrinkle in time? Or did these lost buildings exist only in the shadows, lurking like ghosts, waiting for the unsuspecting to cross their threshold? These are but a few tales that hint at the terrifying truth. Time is not a straight line, but a labyrinth, twisting and coiling in ways we cannot see. Some say these places are cursed, that the spirits of the past cling to them like a sickness,